Today we're going to talk about TrenchZone, which is an independently published war game published in 2010. It is a light war game and it deals with trench war in World War One. It's a topic that you have in several other war games, but usually at a much larger scale. This game gives you an unusually close look at the way trench war works. As you can see, the box has very nice art, the box is very sturdy, and overall the components are of good production quality, mounted map, woohoo! So from the point of view of the components, it's particularly good, especially if you consider that it is independently published, but I'm sure that the main question you have is how does it play? And well, today we're gonna try to answer that question. The rulebook is definitely nice looking. It is short. It has plenty of visual illustrations and examples. Actually, as you can see, a standard page will have some text on top and then a large visual example here. So it looks amazingly well designed, and it is well designed, but it's not as well written. Once you start reading it, probably you'll pick up pretty soon that there are a couple of inconsistencies and ambiguities and things that are taken for granted. So in the end, you will still have to set up the game and try a couple of moves on the board to see, oh, well, that's probably what it means, that's probably how it works. Also, you can look for help online. There's a lot of information about this game available out there. So in the end, it shouldn't be too hard for you to learn the game, especially because in the end, it is a very simple game. This is the way the board may look at the beginning, and I said may because there is a lot of freedom in the way you can place your initial pieces on the board. The board is divided in 3 sectors that cut the board across from side to side. Each sector is divided in areas where the 2 players will play their cards. Then there are the trench zones where you have your pillboxes and artillery and where the trenches are. Then each player will have a zone with barbed wire, and in the middle you have the no man's land. There are 2 ways of winning in this game. The first is by gaining victory points by executing certain actions such as destroying an artillery positions of the enemy or completely emptying an opponent's trench zone. However, the other way of winning, which is probably what most players will try to go for most of the game, is to have some of your squads to go across the battlefield, reach the enemy trench, fight against the enemies in melee combat, and eliminating them all. If at any point of the game there are some of your squads in the enemy trench and there are no enemies in that sector, then you immediately win the game. But trust me, this is much easier said than done, because walking across this area will literally be like advancing against a storm of steel. Players are dealt a hand of 4 cards taken from this deck, and the first thing that happens in a turn is that they will play a card each to determine who has initiative for that turn. As you can see, each card has a number here at the bottom right corner, and the player that played the card with the higher number is the player that will go first for that turn. So, as you can imagine, also the cards that have the highest numbers are the ones that also have the best effects on them. That means that if you want initiative, you had to consume a card with a good effect and you won't be able to use it during the rest of the turn. So it's a pretty simple yet pretty effective mechanism to make initiative interesting and to create a challenge in hand management there. The first thing that the initiative player does is to use off-board artillery to launch an attack. So each turn will start with off-board artillery, which is extremely powerful, so each turn will start with some violence and carnage. The way you do it, you just declare the target that you are attacking on the enemy side, and it might be soldiers in the trenches, pillboxes, artillery positions. If there are soldiers in the open, you can attack those too. And the way it works, you roll 3 dice, you get an extra die if you are attacking something in the sector of one of your manned artillery positions, so that artillery position gives supporting fire. So it can be 3 or 4 dice, and then you check the result against this table, which really gives you a sense how incredibly powerful the artillery could be. True, you need a 6 to destroy an enemy artillery position, but on 3 or 4 dice is really not impossible. A little harder if you're trying, a little easier, for example, to destroy a pillbox. You need a 5 or 6, again, on a roll of 3 or 4 dice. But look what happens against infantry. You only need 4, 5, or 6, so 50% chances to deal a hit against infantry, and each hit kills 5 squads. So you roll 4 dice, you get 2 4s and 2 5s, for example. Then in just one turn you destroy 20 enemy squads. Even worse treatment gets the infantry that are in the open. So 3 or more, they get a hit. Each hit is 5 squads annihilated. After the off-board artillery, you will still get a lot of chances of throwing things at your enemy. You can use gas, which is particularly lethal. You can fire with your pillboxes, just with your machine gun position. There are just so many attacks that you can do. However, a very important thing in the turn will be when you play your cards. These cards you place down in a sector at the rate of 1 per turn. Each sector can hold up to 3, and you do this at the end of a turn. So the idea is that the card that you place down this turn, you won't be able to use it until next turn. But that one is in the activation card phase. You can flip these cards and activate as many as you want, and usually their effects is limited to the sector in which they have been played. And there can be some very interesting things. You can add a machine gun position, you can have some extra artillery fire, you can bring in reinforcements, you can have some air support, get engineers helping you with wire, extra gas. So there are a lot of things that you can do there. However, if you're planning to win by taking control of an enemy's trench, then you will not be content with just using cards individually. You need a long-term strategy on the way you place your cards here, because it really takes a long and slow build-up at 1 card per turn before you can gather and concentrate here enough forces to then concentrate them and send them out in an attack that will survive in the open. So in an ideal world, you would be able to do something like this, which would be to activate, when it's your activation phase, some cards to bring in reinforcement. Like here I would have 30 reinforcement that I can bring in there. Then I activate the advanced card, which allows me to move the squads of 1 space. Then I activate these other cards here, and I do the same thing. I bring in reinforcements, and then I activate the advanced card, and then I do the same here. So more reinforcements, and then I activate this card here, which allows my soldiers to go out in the open and move fast. In that case, they would be able to move 2 spaces, and they would already be in no man's land. This is pretty much the only way, the non-suicidal way, not completely suicidal way, I would say, of attacking an enemy's trench. And it is not by chance that I talked about this happening in an ideal world, because in the real world you will not have the right cards all at once. Even if you had the right ones, it will still take you 9 turns to build up what I just showed you, but then most likely the enemy will play cards to annul your cards, you will have to play some to counteract his attacks. So this probably, that you just saw, probably is never gonna happen. You will have to be happy with gathering some forces, and then it's interesting there when you're trying to evaluate how much is enough and when is the right moment to send them out. In the first couple of games, it's very easy to underestimate how devastating and destroying the enemy's artillery is, and it's very easy to send out not enough people so that nobody actually makes it to the other enemy's trench. So it's an interesting choice there, but the game might get a little slow for some periods of time during the game. After all, remember, in a turn, you fire with your artillery, then you fire with the pillbox, fire, play a card. Then the enemy does the same, then it's your turn, fire with the artillery, and then pillbox, fire. Play a card. That build-up might be slow, and again, not all the cards that you're playing during the play the card phase are exactly what you need for the big push, so it might take a while. Those parts of the game sometimes do drag a little bit. But suppose some of your squads survive advancing against the enemy's fire and survive going through the barbed wire. By the way, both your own and the enemy's barbed wire deals you casualties. Then if they can finally reach the enemy's trench, melee combos ensues. And the way it works, it's simplicity and brutality itself. Each player gets a certain number of dice. They all get one dice, standard, and then the defender gets an extra die, and the player with most squads in the trench gets another die. So usually it will be 2 versus 2 or 1 versus 3. They both roll their dice, and the number that they roll is, very simply put, the number of hits that they deal. It's not a matter of hitting or not hitting, but just if you roll a 15, you destroy 15 squads of the enemy. If the enemy rolls a 10, then 10 of your squads are eliminated. And you just keep rolling until one of the two players, or very often both players, have no squads in the trench. TrenchZone might just be the most violent game that I've ever played. Not because of the violence represented in the game per se, because if you play an Eastern Front game, well then the game probably abstracts from a loss of lives that is just equally, if no more, tragic and high. However, it is the way violence is represented in the game which is quite unique, at least to me. Just because you have this constant killing the opponent's people and just seeing how the opponent mows down yours and repeat that, just you throw so much fire and gas and nasty things, and the same happens to your men. All you're trying to do is just to gather forces enough to launch an attack, of which maybe 10% will make it through. I like in terms of realism and theme how your squads are completely powerless in front of the enemy's technology. They can do nothing but hide and die. There's no middle ground really. And again, I like this. There's no squads that have special abilities that are better than the others. They're all just numbers. They're all the same. All you can do is gather a huge number, send them out, and see what happens. It's cruel and it's sad, but again, it gives you a strong sense of realism, which is surprising when you look at the board and you see how abstract after all the game is. It's just this geometrical grid is red player versus blue player. You don't even know which side is which. However, I think it works well in terms of theme. Then, on the other hand, that causes to me the biggest problem that I have with this game, which is a problem in the pace of the game. Just because you know that the artillery of the enemy is so powerful and you need to have so many squads to have any chance of attacking the enemy's trenches, then because of that you spend a lot of time building up your over-the-top attack and waiting for cards that would allow your troops to move fast in the open. So that really slows down the game, and there are long parts of the game where all you're doing is just put down your cards, build it up, kill other people, see your own people being killed, and not much else happens. However, there are also many positive things about this game. Once you figure out what the rule book means, it is a game that it's easy to play, it is easy to teach. One of the rare word games that lasts less than an hour, so it's one of the rare word games that work also well as a filler. It is overall enjoyable, and however I would say that the pluses, they do outweigh the minuses, but to me, and it's a subjective thing, not by enough that I really love this game. I liked it, I had a good time playing it, it's just not one of my favorite word games. Which of course is perfectly fine, because not every game can be your favorite, otherwise the very concept of favorite doesn't mean anything anymore.